I'm Tasha Sims,
And I'm Marc Caron.
and it's a new year. So we're back. It's Conscious Living Radio. We're still airing on Facebook, which is what we're doing here now. And then the show, of course, Wednesdays, 6 to 7, Co op Radio in Vancouver, 100.5 FM. Oh, wow. It feels like forever since we've actually done a show, Marc, right?
It has been a while, and that's why I'm excited that it's really kind of just the two of us to kind of talk about what's been going on, not just in the world, but kind of our life and everything else, because it's been a pretty interesting couple of years, let alone year.
Well, and everybody's going Happy New Year. It's like this habit. And I think our habits, period, across the board in many, many areas, no longer are fulfilling or no one's buying it. No one's really buying it, right? Because we kind of got fooled a bit. 2020 was so tough and so shocking that 2021 came. We thought, oh, it's in the rear view mirror, all those troubles. And that's not what happened. 2021 was a struggle and continues to be for many, many people, a challenge. And it's not to say there isn't learning or acceleration of growth that's going on, but we want to talk about all of it because I know both of us value authenticity, not just spinning it. I don't want to spin it and talk about, having a great new year. I want to talk about the reality that many people are going through, maybe offer some nuggets. And I don't know, just how about we start saying authentic new year instead of happy new year? I don't know.
Well, it's certainly an option for sure, and it's kind of why we titled the show, Happy New Year, or is it?
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
um, but yeah, and that's why I'm excited to talk about today with you and just kind of see where we're at, where the world's at, and really to provide some tools and nuggets for those who may, you know, certainly need the help right now. And
All of
like you're,
us.
yeah, well, hello, yeah, 2021, I got to say, for myself personally, was one of the most probably challenging years of my life that I can recall, or at
Yeah.
least the past couple of decades, anyways.
Can we do a little bit of global before we go too personal? Is
Oh,
that all right? We can do
yeah,
global.
absolutely,
But,
yes.
when you think about 2021, for me, and everyone probably has moments that hit them hard. And, in terms of human rights, seeing the Taliban come back into power, seeing that government so similar to what it was, nothing really has changed there.
Hmm.
And all the displaced people hit my heart in a really heavy way. I know the stat I read once was 84 million people around the world are displaced, are homeless, don't have a home. Like it's staggering when you think about it. And then we move to the climate crisis. And personally, I think we're failing. The UN has called it a code red for humanity. And there's a lot of pledges, a lot of talk, but those aren't accomplishments. And carbon emissions actually went up in 2021.
That's an
How many
interesting
more how
stat.
many how many more fires? Well, they went down when we were in lockdown in
Hmm.
2020, and then everyone's back into it and it goes back up. It's like people want their cake, they want their life back, and they're actually not willing to change on a personal level. But then on a political level, it's like a whole other thing. Getting people, I don't know what the plan is if we keep. I don't want to get political. I did say I wasn't going to get too political, and I'm about to in terms of fossil fuels because I clearly have a stand, and I will continue to have a stand. But I'm just saying the big picture around climate change isn't. We can't keep pretending. Look at what's happened around the world in terms of nature and its response. It's like Mother Nature's not having it.
No,
Simple as
well,
that.
and here in BC, for those of you who aren't local
Yeah.
to our local geographic area, what we have experienced in this past year has been nothing but extremes on all fronts: earth, wind, fire, water.
Yeah.
It's like, and then you talk about displacement. Look at the Sumas Prairie. There's still over 700 people displaced from their homes from that flood. And that's
Right.
just one area, not to
That's right.
mention our local, like, look at Princeton, look at Merritt, look what happened up there in Lytton in the summer. And,
Yeah.
it's in our backyard all of a sudden.
And as much as these kinds of events, we see people step up and exhibit great kindness and love towards each other. There's also been, when I look around globally, a kind of erosion of kindness when you look at politics anyway. And this increase in divisiveness and this I'm right, you're wrong, this whole polarity, this whole attachment to opinion. It's so, that particular frequency is so, what's the word, unpalatable for me. I can't, I literally, so I definitely went through a moment where my hands were up and I went, I am shutting up, I'm listening, but I'm not buying. And it's not sitting on a fence at all. It is, I need to include what I'm being told physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually in this moment, that this is off. As simple as that. This is not helpful in any way, shape, or form to evolving us as a species, this polarization. And that's, at least back to authenticity, it's a beginning of name what is, right? You've got to start with what is. And that's my experience. Again, I'm not saying I'm right. I am saying in my body, this is the download that lands, and I just say no to. And now what I'm going to say yes to, I guess we're going to get into in the show, because I think they're both important. You've got to know when something is not conducive to your system and to the system of all, because we are all part of that system. And then you have to start to look at, well, okay, what can I do? What happens next? What do I, how do I stay resourceful? I think that's it's got to start there, because we're not going to be advocating for causes if we ourselves are not resourceful. So I agree that you've heard me talk about it before, codependence to independence to interdependence. That's evolution. And we all started off codependence. We all tried to fit and create a self that worked for somebody else, mom, dad, doesn't matter. And you can do that globally. You could still be doing that in all your relationships. But if you evolve, you get to independence, where you know yourself. But that's not enough, because that creates the divisiveness of me, me, me. And that's not it. We're not going to survive, people. Like, we're not. So the next stage of evolution, which is interdependence, means I am me, 100%. And then I ask about you, and you, what about you, Marc? And then Marc comes to the table. So now we have a container with Tasha and Marc in it. And you're responsible for Marc, I'm responsible for Tasha, but we're not looking for what's wrong or right.
We're not laying blame or judging. We're accepting you authentically, whether I agree, disagree, or it makes me, we're listening and holding that space for each other so that we can be our authentic selves. Because like you were saying earlier, we look to fit to our parents, our jobs, our society, culture, religion, whatever that might be. And we lose ourselves and our true identity because we don't speak up. And it's not about necessarily speaking against something, but it's speaking what we believe is true to us. And that's always a funny thing too, because we can both experience something the same and have a different perspective on it, in terms of what's true to us. And it doesn't mean that either of us are wrong. Fact is fact. That's one thing, right? But then there's a perception of how we feel around that.
Exactly.
What happens, the happening, or what you might want to call it, right?
Yeah. And what you just described for me is a state of happiness, because I don't need you to agree with me to feel like we're connected, but I need space in our dynamic to both be myself, as you just described, and receive you. And it's okay that we're different. That tolerance, for some people, it's very difficult. And maybe we do have to grow our tolerance, our ability to accept difference without needing to do anything about the difference right away.
Absolutely.
Can we sit in the same boat, or am I going to throw you off because
can we agree to disagree?
Kind of like that. It's pretty basic.
And some people just cannot do it. They've just so got to be right that, and I've been in situations where you have that, interaction. It's like, well, I guess we could just agree to disagree and it's all good. And some people have a hard time with that.
Well, I think
right?
where it gets tricky is when your
Mm-hmm.
values are being crossed.
Yeah.
And that's what's going on in the world in so many ways. So there's been a lot of anger arising. And I think initially I thought this is fantastic. The Rock, I talked about it last year. The Rock was overturned in 2020. Things that were hidden before were no longer hidden. It was all being exposed. And a lot of anger rose to the surface. And I think it's necessary to allow that. Things aren't healing in the dark. They need to come up. And sometimes when they come up, they're raw and emotional, and there's energy in it that's angry. However, I think if we want to talk about being resourceful, it's really hard to sustain a state of well-being if you're angry, if you have an enemy, if it's always against someone or something. That state is not particularly nourishing to the system, not mentally, not emotionally, not physically, and certainly not spiritually, because spirituality rests on connection, universality, sameness, right? Compassion, all the things that are not polarity, right? Spirituality dissolves those. I'm not talking about religion. I'm talking about spirituality, and the frequency of it is so soothing to the soul and the psyche. So maybe, shall we do that? Shall we break down and just have a few nuggets in each of those categories of things that we have found helpful to stay resourceful?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think maybe something we might get into will circle back to something you said earlier that I want to discuss at some point, where it fits. But yeah, let's go through what
Do you
you want
want
to
to
share
start
there.
with one? I'm going to ask you what you do. Do you want which? You pick one: physically, spiritually, emotionally, mentally. Which one do you want to share a little bit about?
I would say it's a kind of a cross between mental and emotional.
So pick one
And
and dive in.
well, really, from a mental perspective, um, it's really been important to keep positive. And I don't mean rose-colored glasses and a Pollyanna kind of view on things, but it's to know that, I have some belief systems that make it kind of easy for me because I believe that everything is exactly as it should be. I'm right where I'm supposed to be. There's something to be learned here, and that I'm going to be taken care of. The universe, source, whatever you want to call it, will take care of me. Even when I'm going through some crazy stuff, I'll stop and kind of go, hang on a second. Everything is exactly as it's meant to be. I'm right where I'm supposed to be, and I'm taken care of. And to trust that. And there was a day in my life I didn't have that belief system. And the uncertainty would really make me uncomfortable, start creating, a whole different physiological response in my body, as well as mental, which then affects emotions, right?
Yeah, they're all connected. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, it's not about keeping it all, like I say, positive, but it's to look at what can I learn from this? What's good about this situation? And I've trained myself over years with the system to go to that. So it becomes a habit, where in the beginning it was more difficult and it's like, hang on, stop. And now it happens almost instantaneously. So I'm not living and wallowing in the emotional turmoil of overwhelm, or sort of the mental overwhelm, emotions of worry or whatever that might be that comes up. I'm not living there long.
So it sounds like you chose a belief system, because you did choose it.
Absolutely.
That supports you to be resourceful. Like if we were to break that down, you're making your thoughts and the things that you're trusting and what you're leaning into helpful for you, Marc, to stay resourceful. Is that
absolutely?
Yeah.
And I love your word resourceful, because so many times we get stuck in, and even knowing what I do in my belief systems, I still get stuck in that, going, oh, I don't have enough this or this. And there's a quote that I heard in one of my trainings somewhere that I learned, and I loved it, because it was like, there is never a lack of resources in the world, because the world has everything that we have to, take care of us. It's our resourcefulness.
Yes.
And are you being resourceful with what you have? Maybe with who you know, what you can do, your skills and abilities, or are you getting caught up in that, you're damned if you do, damned if you don't, so you don't step up, and you end up not doing anything, and you're still. right?
For sure. Your breath is a resource, and we've all got access to
Oh,
that.
yes.
And it's amazing how we start shallow breathing and cutting off this lifeline that creates resourcefulness, literally. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's great that when you recognize the breath, like breath is so important. When you recognize that short shallows, and this is consciousness and conscious awareness, to be able to recognize that and kind of stop and go, oh, hang on a second, I need to breathe.
Yeah.
And how long do you go down that before you kind of just
For me, in
right?
terms of the mental nugget this year, anyway, 2021, I went back to NLP submodality work. And for those of you who don't know what that is, we take in information through our senses, and different people do that differently in terms of having what they call a primary system. So some people through their eyes, some through their ears. And I'm talking about whatever happens outside of you, you take it in, and it is connected. It generates a feeling inside of you, and you're now in the belief system you were talking about, whatever the old one was. So when you become conscious of this and you begin to work with modalities by changing them, it's almost, well, not almost, it's humorous to me, because you will take something that is like an issue, or you'll notice your thoughts are on a hamster wheel, or you're compulsively coming back to the same person, the same situation, and replaying. And then they said this, and then I said that, and I should have said this, and I should have done that. And you will feel caught and overwhelmed and not resourceful. Yeah. So in this work, you literally bring up a picture. You always work with VAK, visual, auditory,
kinesthetic. Yeah.
So you bring up a picture of what it is those thoughts are. You then change the modality of the picture. So if you see it in color, make it black and white. If it's tiny, make it huge. If it's close, push it far away. You're literally changing your wiring, which then changes your emotional experience of it. And you do that with visual. You do that with auditory. If it's quiet, make it really loud, put it to a song, just change it. It's the change. And then it will change kinesthetically how you feel. And so that little VAK, it's just sort of like in my back pocket where I go, what am I thinking right now? What am I? And I start to play like dials with it. And all of a sudden it kind of, literally for me, it feels like a pop.
Yeah,
go, okay, now I've got some choices.
It's like you're scrambling it up, mixing it up, so it just can't play that same song anymore.
Exactly,
right?
Exactly.
You scratch the record.
That's right. That song is in a groove, and you just pop the needle out by playing this way. And it is playing. It really, the humor part for me always seems to come both visual and the soundtrack, where all of a sudden I'm doing cartoons. I'm taking something that has hurt me to the core, and I'm changing it to a cartoon. I'm adding a soundtrack that's absurd with weird little funny voices in my head and having them talk that way. And all of a sudden, like, everything is different. It's an empowered state. So that's the nugget that I would like to share mentally. And the other thing is, I think it's much easier to do this kind of work when someone is leading you into it instead of trying to do it yourself. So I had mentioned to you, Marc, my heart project for 2021 is complete. And one of them is a meditation that will take you through the submodality work with whatever issue you've got going on, or whatever beef or grievance you've got, and dissolve it, like facilitate the process, which is, I find, super helpful, as opposed to trying to do it yourself, because you're playing. It's hard to be a facilitator and a client at the same time.
Well, that's what they say in the coaching and counseling and therapy world and things. You don't coach yourself, and should not necessarily help your spouse or her family sometimes, because there's too much in there. And I know what you mean about that, doing that. I call it the scramble. And when you do that, it's, you want to get out of your head. And if you're kind of leading yourself, sometimes it could be more difficult. So I totally agree. And I'm really glad, and I'm really proud of you, Tasha, for finishing that project in 2021, and now 2022 is a year you get to share it. So I'm really looking forward to that getting out there and being shared with the world, really.
Well, thank you. And that's the hard part for me. The creation just was, I needed more time, and I love the process of creating a meditation that has a process in it. So you're meditating, but at the same time you're doing, and you can choose like which one's relevant to you. It's the getting it out there. I mean, I know a lot of people struggle with this same thing, that the creation and the being of service is very comfortable for me. The actual aspect of business and getting it out, much less so. But I'm turning that around. 2022, I'm actually going to open to things like, I'm already saying to myself, this is going to be fun. This is going to be new. It is not your wheelhouse, but you know what? It's somebody's. And I am open to that somebody coming forward, looking at this material, going, I want to get this out there.
Yeah.
And so just saying world, actually, I'm saying it now on radio. I'm open to that.
Fantastic. Well, what I wanted to say, and I love that you kind of touched on that, because so many people, you talked about overwhelm earlier, in the space that you're in, exactly what you're describing. One of the killers for people is overwhelm, because they can't do it all. And you have to focus on your strengths. A marketer or a tech guy is not going to have the same strengths to put together what you're putting together.
Right.
All right. And your strength isn't marketing and tech and web development and campaigns and all that kind of stuff that goes with it. So, as I wanted to share a nugget of just teamwork, like this is how we have to support each other in a inclusive, cooperative, collaborative, supportive way, so that we're sustaining ourselves. With the world changing, we don't know what's coming up, and for people's work, people are having challenges in that way. So, we start working together and supporting each other. That's where the magic happens. That's where the synergy is.
I love
right?
it too. I love it.
So if there's anybody out there who wants to, help Tasha out some, reach out.
Oh, for sure. I'd be so open, you can't even imagine.
I know I've been blessed to be invited to work with you and support you in some of the classes you've done at Rhodes College, and your work is fantastic. You cover all the bases, really, and as different as the work that you and I do in some ways, some of it's very much the same in terms of NLP and those sorts of things. So it's great that you're getting it out there, and it's for everybody out there who's doing this. And I know a lot of people in the work that I've done with Conscious Living Network and events and everything else, an artist, a performer, a workshop facilitator, whoever you are, whatever your gift is out there, your gift might not be the getting it out there part, but man, can you do the stuff that person can't do?
Yeah.
That's where we got to bring everybody together to support each other for future success, really, of humanity, right?
I love it. Thank you, Marc. That's awesome. Very
no, well, you're very welcome. And I mean it right from my heart, because this is something I wanted to kind of segue back to in a way where, you were talking about contribution and helping people and what's going on in the world, and even locally with the floods and everything that's been happening, is really, if we could always just help each other, and be generous and contributing in our spirit and our nature without disaster putting us in a place to do that. Why does it take disaster, catastrophe, death, all of these things for people to start all of a sudden helping? Right. It's great to see, like watching those pilots fly and stuff into the interior of BC where nobody could get to because all the roads were shut down. Amazing. All the different communities providing food and everything else. But why does it take sometimes these kinds of things to happen? Right. And that's the one thing I'd like to learn from all of this, is how do we get back regular even more without that being the kind of the trigger for us to do it?
Well, it's a great question. I think it keeps coming back to resourcefulness, because if you realize there's an unlimited amount of resources, when you're struggling, you do need help sometimes. And it's hard to be a helper if you're struggling. And so it's like a circle. I see it like a circle, but, or the village supporting the individuals who might need more help than someone else that day. But it all seems to rest on the we, right? Yeah. That we are connected. We're the same, no matter what's coming out of our mouths or what shells we're in and how we look and what we believe. The essence, the energy is the same. And yeah, default to kindness, I'm with you. I'm in. I pledge. I'm 100% hands on. And if I catch a part of me not wanting to do that, again, this is where I see sometimes people in the spiritual community deny that they have a part that is self-serving or might be on the darker side, or who knows whatever it is that gets activated. All these other parts of us that are not defaulting to kindness and love, you know how you support them to shift and grow and evolve? You love them.
Yes.
You don't judge
unconditionally.
them.
Yes.
Unconditionally, you accept
Yeah.
and have compassion that, wow, there's this part of me. So it becomes an and instead of I'm this or I'm that. Again, polarity. It's like I am committed to being kind and full of love. And I have a part that, whatever it is, that level of acceptance will create a soft place to land in your body for all of you. And when you do, you're then resourceful. So then you can turn to somebody else who might be struggling and be there for them authentically without feeling like it's a you or me kind of scenario. It's both. That's interdependence, self and other equally.
And isn't that what we all want in our basic human needs, is to be loved, to know that we matter, to be connected? And, I think one of the things we fear the most is in our human nature is rejection, right? So when we can accept, like you were saying earlier, unconditionally love, unconditionally not judge, and let people know that it's a safe space.
And if you're judging, you say so, as opposed to pretend you're not, because I can't handle that. I can't do the spiritual mask either. So if you're judging, you own it and go, oh, I'm noticing I'm feeling really judgmental. Like, I value that. Everything. I feel safe when people are congruent, when their inside matches their outside. I feel safe.
And let's talk about judgment for a second, because sometimes it gets misconstrued, because we have to be thinking and know what we like, what we don't like, and be able to analyze situations. Right? For me, judgment means I'm not putting you down, that you're less than me, and so that I could feel better than. And, like the blame game drives me crazy. Everybody wants to blame. It's like, no, let's accept responsibility for ourselves.
But
right?
You know why
Without
people
judgment.
blame, right? You know why people blame. We all.
Well, I have my own
blame. All of us. It's the same answer, actually, for everyone when you're blaming. If you go in deeply enough through the layers, there's fear.
Yeah,
at the bottom is fear.
And fear of what? I would say rejection, not being accepted.
I think it varies from person to person, but ultimately there's a fear, a lack of feeling whole and okay. And so then you layer up over it. You need to defend. Mine is safety, that, that I have to protect myself somehow. So I think people have different reasons, but fear itself is what gets dissolved when you tell the truth, your truth, not the truth with a capital T, but when you do this, a part of me, and you just say it, the fear kind of goes, oh, it just lost its power. It just came out of the dark. It just got lit up and it dissolves.
And that's a part of being authentic.
Exactly.
Right. And I think there's some magic, because how many of us are wearing mask over a mask over a mask over a mask,
Well,
when we can just.
I know I'm not, because I've spent too many years peeling and getting this really painful.
I might have a couple left, but I do my best to, what you see is what you get.
But here's the thing. I want to move to identity, the word identity.
Yes.
That's what I'm dissolving. And oh my God, it's not easy. It is not easy, because some of the identities are awesome. Like, I like them. My identity when I was teaching, I loved teaching, but when I stopped formally teaching, I could feel how lost I started to, this sense of loss. And I dug into it and went, okay, this is an identity piece, which we know we are not what we do. We are not the role we play. So for authenticity, what I mean by peeling off, even that is a mask, an identity piece saying, I am this, I am a teacher, I think is something that if you can dissolve it, you'll expand even more. And that can be very uncomfortable, that process.
Yeah, so true.
we've still got, and I'm just conscious of time because I really want to get into action at the end of this.
Absolutely. We've got about 15 minutes or so.
So let's just do, I know we said we'd give nuggets on all of them. That was a lot of mixed nuggets of a mental and emotional, I think, right now, what we were just chatting about. Mm-hmm. I would love to add one more thing that I think is my lifesaver.
Yeah.
When I know what I'm feeling, I'm owning it. I feel whatever it is. And rather than attribute it to anything outside of myself, I literally know that it's hooked into a meaning, and I name the meaning. I'm accountable for it. So I feel hurt. I make it mean that you are not considering me. Now, you're not going to defend that because I'm owning it. I make it mean that. You might actually hear me and go, gee, Tasha, that's not my intention. Or you might, whatever it is, it's so different than, Marc, when you do blah, 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 it really hurts me. And, and you're saying that I'm not as important. Like, of course, you're going to come back and defend with that energy coming at you. So that, it sounds like semantics, but I swear it's the number one thing that has changed my life in my relationship to conflict and my relationship with other people, to make room for everyone. Mm-hmm. I will only tell you what I'm feeling, the meaning I'm making. I'll ask about yours. So assumptions too. I'm dropping the assumptions. And if you do the same thing back, we've just created a beautiful, safe container, right? Mm-hmm.
And that's a big part of just owning your own personal power. So you're not putting it on me, you're owning your own feelings, right? You're not giving me the power to control how you feel.
Right.
Like, you made me feel guilty, right? Well,
no such thing.
Why are you guilty in the first place? And but you give away your power by putting it all on the, external and outside of you.
100%. And when you change the meaning, the feeling changes immediately. Yeah. So why not empower yourself, like you're saying, and go in the direction where you can actually have some choice? Because I have no choice over what you do, but I have 100% choice over and responsibility over what I do.
Absolutely. Yeah. Beautifully said. Okay.
So we didn't play the song. I have a feeling I really wanted to play this song, but we're not going to get to. Sometimes on the radio show, one of my big excitements, having come from a background of radio, is music. And if we're not going to play it right now, but guys, I really suggest maybe when the show's over, you look up on YouTube Wookie Foot, and the song is called The Great Unknown, and just play it and breathe it in, because it's so beautiful. It's so gentle, but it very much touches on a state of being that could be helpful in terms of being resourceful for 2022. So we'll leave it at that. I know on the radio show,
I'm going to add one little piece of that. For those of you listening on air, that's going to be the song you hear opening the show. And just the small little nugget, one of the reasons we don't do it on these live broadcasts is for the copyright issues in YouTube and Facebook and things of that nature. But with the radio, they have SOCAN and things of that nature. So it's just a different ball game. So that's why we don't play it here while we're doing it live on the air.
Which makes me very sad, because I would love to share it. Every once in a while, we're going to do it at the end today.
Yes,
we're going to attempt to play it. You guys get to watch the video of a different song, and that's how we'll close the show, at least that. But here's where I wanted to go to. When you're feeling, my number one nugget for when you're feeling helpless, powerless, overwhelmed, and you've tried these other things. You've soothed yourself. You've tried to regulate your system. Perhaps you've looked at the other aspects of taking care of yourself physically, of meditating, taking care of yourself emotionally, of mentally. Then I think where it ends up, and this is what I had to do last year, because I really found it felt so meaningless. That's where I started to go. And that is not a state that I'm comfortable in. I'm comfortable with causes, with passion, with commitment, with creativity. Meaningless? Whoa, it's like, whoa, like nothing, like purgatory. So of course I'm experiencing it, and I have to enter this because I know too much to any longer pretend that whatever I'm experiencing, as you said at the top of the show, doesn't have a reason. It really does. And it's on me to enter it. So I did. And what happened was I started to cry in every, I don't know, commercial or what, like the most ridiculous moments, tears would come to my eyes. I couldn't talk to certain people without getting like overly emotional, where part of my brain is going, oh, wow, you look like a crazy woman. Like you look insane right now.
I can relate.
Okay. So as that came up, I went, okay, so it's not meaningless. There's a great deal of feeling here, but I feel powerless. And there's a difference. There's a difference. So sometimes to cope with powerless, we created an internal defense that is not feeling. And when I opened up those floodgates, I was, when it happened was when Kiska, remember the orca at Marineland? It's the last remaining orca. And so even now telling you about it, I can feel my heart hurts. It's still there. She is still alone. She's been there for 40 years. It is criminal to me when I see that whale banging its head against the walls of its container. Like, it's horrific. And so that's just one piece that I went, I have to step up. I have to do something, not just feel it, not just talk about it, but do something. So I did. I started a bit of a campaign, social media, following it up, and it led me to this group called Animal Justice. It's a Canadian group. Hopefully we're going to put the links up once I send them to Marc. So it's animaljustice.ca. And it's led by this young woman who's a lawyer, Camille. I can't remember her last name right this second. Maybe I have it here somewhere. Labchuk. And she is the Canada's leading animal rights lawyer. So she's worked on things from cruelty in farming to all these animals in captivity in zoos and aquariums, to shark finning, to puppy mills. But she's literally she's a lawyer, she's changing the laws. And Canada has some of the worst animal advocacy laws in the Western world. So it's time. We need to advocate. And so I got involved with that and feel very, very passionate. Some of the movies we saw this year at the Vancouver International Film Festival dealt with, how we're treating the whales, the orcas, even fish farming, and how it's all connected.
Oh, Extinction, I believe it was called.
Yeah, it was so good. So I guess what I'm trying to say, those were the ones I picked. I mean, I also continued, I feel my education in understanding my privilege, and the whole, systemic racism was a big piece that drew me. But it was, I guess what I want to say to you is find the portal for yourself that calls you to action, that you feel something about, and that you're driven to stand for change, which is really different than just making bad guys and fighting. Stand for making change and do something. And I will guarantee if you do that, the overwhelm diminishes, the helplessness diminishes. You have victories, you may have losses where you go, oh, didn't go through. But if it's a bill or something like that, or you go to a protest, and whatever your experience is, you will feel connected and part of something because you're doing something. Does that make sense?
It makes total sense to me, because I know that when you can get into something that you're passionate about, you're giving beyond yourself, you kind of forget about your own BS, right? And your own problems. Because you're even in a collective as well, which, anytime, if I'm coaching anything that I'm doing with anyone, if they're feeling that and they're feeling stuck, I say, tell them to go contribute somewhere. Go give back beyond yourself somewhere, whether it be a soup kitchen or a homeless, whatever it is that makes your heart sing that you want to do. And it really alleviates that, those feelings you're talking about, and, helplessness or whatever it may be that you're going through. Mm-hmm. Contribution is a very, very powerful tool for everyone, for the people that you're giving to and giving back. And I always like to say, if you're giving beyond yourself, come from the heart with the right intention, not because you're thinking you're going to get something in return either, right?
Well,
You know,
that's not it.
no,
Absolutely.
exactly. But, it happens out there, and it's just find what you're passionate about and give back and volunteer. And, it's amazing what people will do. I know, part of my volunteer work, I'll spend time, money, effort, and energy to go beyond. And you don't even think about it because you love what you're doing so much. And really, if you're helping people, helping the planet, which is the, climate, animals, and everything else, there's something to be said for that.
And
And I think,
people and our own neighborhood
yeah,
even. Yeah.
well, it's local, we've seen a lot of it here
Yeah.
locally as well. So, but whatever it is you do it what feels right for you, right?
The other project that I supported that I think I'd love to put a link up to because they're looking for people to get involved in many ways. It's the Whale Sanctuary Project. So they're out of Halifax. They want to build a sanctuary where, where do these animals that have been in captivity go? So for whales and dolphins, they would create a place where they could live in an environment that at least maximizes well-being and autonomy. And so, of course, lots of funds have to be raised for that and things have to be done. But those two organizations I'm going to keep promoting and you know what? Can we have Camille on as a guest? The
You can do
executive
whatever you
director?
like.
Can we do that? Let's contact her and get her on as a guest and we'll do a whole
Okay.
show on animal rights.
Yeah, just get me her name and the links and I'll reach out.
Yep, you got it. Okay, so is there anything before we start to wrap up? Because we are going to end with a song. Oh, the arts. Oh, do I have time? I really don't.
We have 5 minutes.
Okay. Are you watching a lot of streaming? Are you watching shows? Or did you watch?
I refuse to answer that question on the grounds that it may incriminate me.
Did you watch Don't Look Up?
I did.
Okay, so there's a satire that is so pertinent and so relevant.
That was a satire?
Ha ha. The one I want to also shout out, like I'm going to say, if you haven't seen it, it's important. And the other one that I think is super important is called Station 11. And that's an HBO series that was written by a Canadian who grew up on Denman Island, of all places. So she's done really well. Emily St. John Mandel. But it's a pandemic. So a lot of people aren't watching it. I tell them, you've got to see this. And they go, oh, no, I don't want to see any more about the pandemic. It's about the triumph of the human spirit, ultimately, and how we need to do more than just survive and what that means. It's beautiful. It's really, really well done. Well,
and that's on Crave, you were saying, right?
Yeah. Well, Crave and HBO now are connected.
Yeah.
So that's where you would watch. It's a series. And, Game of Thrones, George Martin, that author, he called it's based on a book that Emily wrote. And in 2014, he called it the best novel of 2014. So super well written, very, very layered. Again, this whole idea, we don't need an enemy. We need to.
Well, I think it's interesting you said written in 2014 and it's pandemic related. And here we are 7-8 years later.
Yeah. Well, she was highly influenced by Star Trek too. So yeah, it's super interesting to look at. Yeah. Okay. Awesome. So thanks for letting me get those arts in there and little
anytime. Well, I think, we talk about arts. It's like support your local artists, what you can do. There's a lot we can do out there just with the arts because gives us peace too, right? Gives people joy, whether it's music, movies, whatever it is. It's just another one of those tools and little nuggets to kind of get outside of yourself and take something in that you love. I've got friends who love the art gallery in Vancouver. They go regularly and it just gives them peace and joy and really connects them with a like-minded community as well.
It's the best of us. It's the creative part of us. It's an aspect of humanity that we can feel proud of. So yes, let's support it.
Absolutely. So, hey, before we wrap everything up, we did talk about authenticity a lot, and I know you're the authentic self counseling gal. So tell people how they can reach you, because we're always helping and sharing and bringing other people's work to the light. I want you to share with our listeners and let them know if they, want to take a deeper dive, get your meditations that you mentioned earlier. Where can they find you?
Well, thanks. AuthenticSelfCounseling.com is the website. And so that there's a lot of information on there in terms of my approach and how I work. But it very much is, once you name what you say you want, we look at what is stopping you from having it, which I know is a kind of coaching perspective. But to me, it's so valuable to make therapy practical. So while we may deep dive into many, many places, ultimately, you've got to know those two things. You've got to know what your values are and what do you want, and then what's going on that's stopping you. So there's a very practical aspect to the way I work, and the meditations, and a transpersonal aspect that, I can't separate anymore. Mind, body, soul, like it's all connected to me.
Absolutely.
The meditations I have not put up a landing page yet, so that's to come, but they will be on the website as well. And like I said, the new ones, there's 6 of them that I've created that I'm so passionate about, because the nugget in each one is a core piece of therapy that people would spend hundreds of dollars for. And instead you get a meditation where you can practice that piece at home on your own. And that makes my heart sing.
Beautiful. So, well, when that's ready to go and is on your website live, we'll talk more about that, because I think it's really important that everybody does that and does some sort of personal work, because I know if I didn't, I don't know where I'd be right now.
Yeah, we all need support at times. So yeah, if you can put the link on this, that'd be great.
I will. It's actually little secret. It's already in there in the Facebook and the YouTube comments and in the description. So it's already there, and it'll be on the page that we create. So we are nearing the end of our time. So maybe you can sign us off and introduce our song, and we'll one thing I just want to say is really nice connecting with you again and doing a show. I like it when we do these just one-to-ones and talk about things we're passionate about and excited, and things that make a difference in our lives. And I thank you for that today.
It was fun. Thank you, Marc. I really enjoyed it. This was Marc's idea, and when he first said it, I went, Marc, I've got nothing to say. Like, what do you mean do a show?
That's not the Tasha I know, because every time we get going, we can go on. You and I can get going pretty good.
But that was also legitimately how I felt. And so the movement from there to here was simply saying, in my mind, my go-to is, well, I don't have to say anything for a reason. I just have to be congruent. So
be
I'm
authentic.
Say what I'm
be your authentic self.
Authentic, which is inside matches your outside. And you know that Carl Rogers said the definition of anxiety is when your inside does not match your outside. So if you start to feel anxious, name what's happening in there, say it, and it will lower the anxiety.
I love it.
All right, my friend, and everyone out there, thanks for joining us. Again, the radio show is Wednesdays, 6 to 7 p.m. This song that we're closing with, I love Rising Appalachia. We're going to play it here, and you're going to play the video, which I'm excited about. They're beautiful people. The song is called Resilient. Listen to the lyrics, because it's so pertinent and profound and relevant to today. So authentic 2022 to you all.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tasha. And here we go.
I am resilient. I trust the movement. I negate the chaos, uplift the negative. I'll show up at the table again and again and again. I'll close my mouth and learn to listen. Whoa, whoa, oh, oh. 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 These times are poignant, the winds have shifted. It's all we can do to stay uplifted. Pipelines through backyards, wolves howling out fronts. Yeah, I got my crew, but truth is what I want. Realigned and on point, power to the peaceful. graceful. Prayers to the waters, women at the center. All vessels open to give and receive. Let's see the system brought down to its knees. Whoa, 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 whoa. Ooh, 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 whoa, 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 whoa. Ooh, ooh, ooh. Dirt, yeah, made of the fine things. My father taught me that I'm a speck of dust and this world was made for me. So let's go and try our luck, said. I've got my roots down, 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 down deep. I've got my roots down, 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 down deep. I've got my roots down, down, down deep. I've got my roots down, down, down deep. So what are we doing here? What has been done? What are you gonna do about it when the world comes undone? My voice feels tiny, and I'm sure so does yours. Put us all together, make a mighty trust the movement. I negate the chaos, uplift the negative. I'll show up at the table again and again and again. I'll close my mouth and learn